If you agree that no veteran should be forgotten, no matter how old, quiet, or misunderstood, then like and subscribe, because this one needs to be remembered. They called him Crazy Frank at Valley Pines Assisted Living, a name whispered more often than his real one, Frank Maddox, and usually with an eye roll or a smirk. He wasn't dangerous, just odd. Talked to empty chairs, saluted the breakfast tray, sometimes stood in the hallway at dawn like he was waiting for roll call that never came. To the nurses, he was a harmless routine, a man with no known family and a 1,000-yard stare. To the residents, he was background noise, a shadow that shuffled from dining hall to rec room mumbling about the ridge and classified paperwork. He wore the same green sweater every day, carried a duffel bag even to bingo night, and always kept a meticulously folded American flag at the foot of his bed. No one asked why. No one thought to. His door was often closed, blinds drawn, except during meal hours when he'd appear exactly on time. Never early, never late, like clockwork. Staff joked that he had military punctuality and laughed as if that made the eccentricities easier to digest. But beneath those offhand comments and whispered jokes was something colder, dismissal. People saw him as an old man playing soldier, a mind gone soft around the edges. Only one person ever listened, Laya, a part-time CNA barely out of school, with more compassion than credentials. She'd refill his water pitcher and pause when he mumbled names she didn't recognize. Captain Rourke, Captain Evans, Lieutenant Morales, all accounted for. He'd whisper on certain mornings, marking a small notepad in perfect block lettering. She didn't interrupt, just watched, curious. "Mr. Maddox," she asked once gently, "what's the ridge?" He looked at her then, really looked, like a man seeing daylight after a storm. "A place we were never supposed to be," he said quietly. "Where they told us not to come back, not even in memory." She didn't push, just nodded and let him finish his notes. Other staff dismissed his journal as scribbles, but Lila noticed every letter was uniform, every word deliberate. His writing wasn't messy, it was military. One night, after a long shift, she passed by his room and saw him standing by the window, back straight, hand on the windowsill like he was on watch. Rain tapped the glass, but he didn't move. She knocked. He didn't respond. "Just watching the perimeter," he finally said. And something about the way he said it, calm, low, alert, made her pause. That weekend, while sorting mail, Lila noticed something strange. A thick, cream-colored envelope sat at the bottom of the stack. No return address. Just bold type that read, "Franklin E. Maddox, personal." It had a federal seal on it. She asked around. "Oh, that's probably just one of those scam VA letters," the desk nurse replied. "Toss it." But she didn't. She slipped it under Frank's door. The next morning, he was already waiting at his table, a black pen in one hand, the envelope untouched beside his oatmeal. "Are you going to open it?" Lila asked. Frank shook his head slowly. "Not yet. Need to prepare." He didn't touch his breakfast that day, just stared at the letter like it might explode. 2 days later, the envelope was gone from his room. So was his notepad. He seemed quieter than usual, less muttering, fewer salutes. But then, a week later, something changed. Lila walked in to find Frank at his window again, but this time, dressed in full uniform, pressed slacks, polished shoes, and a jacket so sharp it looked like it had never been worn. But it had. The patches were faded, the nameplate dull, the buttons chipped at the edges. It wasn't a costume. It was a memory made visible. "They're coming," he said softly. "Soon." Lila blinked. Who's coming? The ones who never forgot. The ones who read the file. He sat down with a slow exhale, like a man easing back into a role he thought was gone forever. "They told me this day might come." The next morning, staff dismissed it as one of his episodes. "Probably had a dream," they said. "Just play along, it's easier." But something was different. Frank moved differently. Straighter. Quieter. Not shuffling anymore. Marching. He waited at the front entrance every afternoon that week, rain or shine, until sunset. Lila noticed the duffel bag was zipped now, packed. "Sir," she asked one evening, half joking, "you going somewhere?" Frank just nodded. "Soon." On Thursday, he gave her a folded note. "Don't open it unless I'm gone." She smiled nervously but tucked it in her pocket anyway. That night, she peeked inside the duffel when he wasn't looking. Contents meticulously arranged. Worn dog tags, yellow documents. a velvet box she didn't dare open, and a photograph of 12 soldiers, their eyes locked in solemn camaraderie, standing on a dirt ridge half a world away. In the middle was a younger Frank, clean-cut, unblinking, holding a map in one hand and a radio in the other. The photo was dated March 1968. The back read, Operation Widow's Ridge. Never confirmed. Never forgotten. That's when Lila stopped laughing at the jokes the other staff told. Because Crazy Frank? He wasn't rambling. He was remembering. And someone, somewhere, had remembered too. The envelope. The uniform. The way he stood like a man still serving. It wasn't delusion, it was duty. And duty never ends. Only waits to be called again. Frank Maddox wasn't waiting to be noticed. He was preparing for something no one else saw coming. But it was coming. And when it arrived, Valley Pines would never look at him the same way again. It started with a call no one expected. Well, no one but Frank. Friday morning, just after the mail cart made its usual rounds and the cafeteria prepped another round of powdered eggs, a black SUV pulled up in front of Valley Pines. Not a delivery van, not a transport bus. Government plates. Tinted windows. No music. No hesitation. It idled for 30 seconds. Then two sharply dressed military officers stepped out in full service dress. Not the kind worn at retirements or Veterans Day parades, but the kind reserved for ceremonies they don't talk about in press releases. One carried a briefcase. The other, a garment bag. They didn't ask for directions. They didn't check in. They walked in a line straight to the front desk, eyes scanning every corner like they were still on active duty. "We're here for Captain Franklin Maddox," the taller one said. "Not Mr. Maddox. Not Frank. Captain." The receptionist blinked, uncertain. "He's, in the rec room? Or maybe lunch." But Lila already knew where he was. Frank had been sitting at the edge of the main hall since dawn, uniform crisp, duffel by his side, eyes forward. She hadn't dared ask if he was really waiting for someone because, deep down, she already knew the answer. "He's ready," Lila said quietly, stepping out from behind the nurse's station before anyone else could answer. "Been ready all week." The officers nodded, said nothing. They approached Frank slowly, like they were walking into sacred ground, and when they reached him, both saluted first. Not a casual gesture. Not out of pity. A full, regulation, eyes-forward salute held long enough for the silence to wrap around the entire lobby like a net. Frank stood, returned it, without a tremble, without a blink. "Captain Maddox," the taller officer said, "the Department of Defense confirms the declassification of Operation Widow's Ridge, and by order of the Secretary of the Army, you are to be presented with official recognition, pending citation from the Medal of Honor Committee. Sir, we've come to escort you." And just like that, the air disappeared from the room. Nurses froze. Orderlies stopped wheeling carts. One resident dropped a fork. For years, people called him Crazy Frank. Said he was making up war stories, pretending to be someone important. But now two officers had just addressed him by rank and presented him with something more powerful than a medal: truth. Frank didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply nodded, as if all of this was overdue, not surprising. As if he had spent the last 2 decades waiting for someone, anyone, to look past his wrinkles and worn shoes and see the man who had once held a mountain pass with a broken radio and 2 flares while evacuating 27 wounded soldiers through enemy territory. That story, which the world had never heard, now had a name. Now had evidence. The officers didn't speak further. They opened the garment bag to reveal a fresh, formal jacket with his name stitched in gold. Lila helped him into it gently, brushing dust from the sleeves like she was touching something holy. "I knew you weren't crazy," she whispered. Frank looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he smiled. Not wide, but enough to say everything that hadn't been said before. "Thanks for delivering the letter," he said. "I wouldn't have made it without you." He turned to the assembled residents and staff, now crowding the entrance like school children on a field trip. "I wasn't waiting for a ride," he said calmly. "I was waiting to be remembered." And with that, he turned and walked between the 2 officers, head high, footsteps steady. Not once did he look back. Not once did he have to. The silence behind him said more than any goodbye. The SUV door was held open for him, like he was royalty. And when it closed, and the engine hummed back to life, no one moved. Not for minutes. As the car pulled away, Lila finally pulled the folded note from her pocket, the one he'd given her just in case. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside, in perfect block script, were 8 words. You don't salute the man. You salute the watch. She read it twice, then 3 times, then pressed it to her chest like it was the last part of him still here. That night, the entire facility felt different. No one played cards. No one watched the usual rerun. Even the loudest residents whispered like the halls had turned sacred. By morning, the news had broken. A Pentagon press release confirmed the long-rumored Operation Widow's Ridge, a covert Vietnam mission so classified it had stayed buried for 50 years. Frank Maddox was named as the lead field commander. 6 confirmed lives saved under fire. 2 silver stars already earned. But now, Medal of Honor review underway. The man they mocked for saluting shadows had been saving lives before most of them were born. And he never told them, never once bragged, never claimed rank. He just waited, patiently, quietly, until history caught up with the truth. And when it did, he didn't say, "I told you so." He just stood up and walked forward, like soldiers do. It wasn't a headline that told the world who Frank really was. It was the silence after the Medal of Honor ceremony, the kind of silence that doesn't follow applause, but truth. 3 weeks after he left Valley Pines, Frank appeared on every TV in the facility, pressed uniform, Medal of Honor on his chest, as steady as ever. He didn't bask in the attention. He just sat like he always had, watching. The president stood at the podium and said, "Captain Franklin Maddox refused evacuation under fire to ensure no wounded man was left behind." For years, his mission was classified. Today, it's recognized. No one in our building moved. No one spoke. People who used to chuckle when he saluted breakfast trays were standing straighter, wiping tears they didn't expect. Nurses, orderlies, residents, all frozen in the moment they realized what they'd missed. That night, I found a letter on his old pillow, addressed simply, to Lila, the one who noticed. Inside, in that blocky handwriting I'd seen so many times, were just a few lines. I never needed medals. I just needed to be seen before I was gone. You did that. So now I go in peace. Tucked inside was a photo of Frank and a squad in Vietnam, faces dusty and tired, flares still smoking behind them. On the back, "We came home because someone stayed behind. Never forget the one who watches the ridge." He passed away peacefully the following week. Medal beside him. Flag overhead. No fanfare, just the way he would have wanted. The military sent an honor guard. The local paper ran his story front page. Families of soldiers he saved sent letters and flowers to Valley Pines. And us? We changed. That hallway where he stood every morning? Renamed Maddox Wing. The staff stopped dismissing veterans. Residents began saluting first. And every morning now at 0800, someone, nurse, resident, admin, stands by that same window for 2 minutes of silent watch. Not to copy Frank. To carry his post. Because he wasn't waiting for a ride. He was holding the line. For us. And when he left, he didn't just pass away, he passed it on. A quiet torch, lit by patience, duty, and dignity that never asked to be seen, but burned bright enough that once we finally looked, we'd never forget again.